I'm going to share a little bit about myself for those of you who don't know me. My name is Mara Walsh. I'm in the United States and specifically on the East Coast between Philadelphia and New York. I started leading physical tours with EF Tours as a Girl Scout leader, taking girls and their families to international destinations every summer. I've since expanded my physical travel program and added adult-only tours as well as family-friendly tours and some customized tours for people as well. In nearly all of my tours, I partner with EF Tours or their adult division, Go Ahead Tours, and that's where I know most of my tour guides and tour directors from. I hope to be able to offer many more physical tours in the coming months, but until then, we will continue to do our virtual tour series. There's a couple reasons I started this virtual tour series. The first one is that I really wanted to be able to support the tour director community during this time of travel restrictions where they have not been able to work. And the second reason is I really wanted to keep the excitement of travel alive for my travel group and extend that opportunity to those who have learned about us with these tours through their friends, their family, social media, and other means. So welcome to everyone. We have done several tours in the past months since COVID. And if you have missed any of those tours, they are all recorded and they are on our website, girltraveltours.com/virtual tours. And we have several more virtual tours coming up. So I want to be able to share with you some of those so that you get set and you can sign up for them. We have Northern Ireland and the Troubles, Iceland, Lucerne and the Alps, Budapest, the Royals, Ontario and Quebec. We just added the Vatican City, musical tour of Britain, Antarctica, Andalusia, Jerusalem, Belgium, and I'm working on Mexico for Cinco de Mayo. As long as you're interested in viewing these virtual tour presentations, we will continue to produce them. I know many of you have found the virtual tours through Facebook, and some of you are on Facebook right now viewing us, so welcome. You can interact on the Facebook feed as we do in our chat and our questions on Zoom. There are several relentless, unscrupulous people on Facebook that have taken my tours and other legitimate tours, and they have copied the pages and the events so that they look exactly like these tours, but they tell you that they they tell you they're free, but they want you to put the credit card in to access the tours. Please, please, please never give a credit card to enter a free tour, especially a free virtual event that is done by Girl Travel Tours. My virtual tour presentations do not require credit cards, and they are absolutely free to attend. You can always safely access our events through girltraveltours.com. or by viewing my Facebook page, but please be careful as the scammers have gotten so good at copying these events that a lot of times you'll think that you're on my page and you're really not. Okay, that's enough about that, but just keep the word out there and make sure that we continue to educate people so that they realize not to get caught up with these scammers. Okay, so before we get going, I want to share a few ways for you to interact with us. Feel free to ask questions about the tour director, or my travel program using the Q&A feature. We will go over those questions after the tour. You can also use the chat feature to stay engaged with me throughout the tour. And if you're on Facebook, you can use the feed to connect with one another. I always like to include an interactive poll. Today, we're going to be lucky. We're going to have a few interactive polls, but I'm going to do the first one, which is essentially to get to know your connection with a train tour. So the first question is, have you ever been on a train tour before? I'm going to launch this poll. I've been and loved it. I have a trip like this booked. I plan to go in the future. I have no set plans, but I'm interested in the idea, or I am solely interested in experiencing it virtually. So it seems like a lot of people are interested in this idea, and I think that they will find themselves pleasantly surprised when this tour begins for us. I'm going to end the poll so that you can see what that experience was. And it looks like we have probably 60% of the people that are interested in this, and maybe 15% that are going in the future, and then about 18% that have been on one in the future. So I'm going to share the results so that everybody can see that. Again, if the polls stay up in your computer screen, you can exit out of them on your own. So please know that if it's still visible, you can exit out of them on your own. Okay, so today's tour, like all of our tours, are scheduled for 90 minutes plus the Q&A. And I hope you are ready for an exhilarating 90 minutes. A tour wouldn't be complete without a fantastic tour guide. Of course, if we're not traveling, these guides are not working. So later in the presentation, I will share with you via chat and the Q&A how you can tip the tour director. You will also receive an email tomorrow if you're on the Zoom call with directions within the email on how to tip. So if you missed that today, by all means, you can see that in the email that comes as a follow-up. A tour director that we have today is no exception. In fact, she is much more than a tour director. She is an amazingly creative storyteller. So today we have the treat of a tour that is intertwined with a mystery. Today we are lucky to have back a wonderful tour guide from Romania, Georgiana, who will share an unforgettable journey on the Orient Express. Some of you may be familiar with the similar story brought to you by Agatha Christie. And in fact, I'm going to launch another poll to see how familiar you might be with this. So this poll is trying to gauge your familiarity with the Agatha Christie stories. So we know that there's a movie and a book, and we want to get an idea how familiar you are with either. So we have about 50% of the people who are logging in right now. It looks like most people are familiar with either the book or the movie being more so. I guess that's the day of technology, right? People watch movies instead of read books. So I actually read the books when I was young because my mom was an avid Agatha Christie fan. So I'm going to actually end this poll and share it with the audience so that you can see. That most 37% have seen the movie. Not many have read the book, so you have to go out and see those books. And some people aren't familiar with it at all. So I'm going to share those results so people can see that. So Georgiana, I think this gives us a good idea of the background we have for our audience. And if you're ready, I'll let you get started and come online and share with you the mystery on the Orient Express. Hi, Mara. It's nice to have you back, Georgiana.
Nice to see you.
You too. I'm going to stop sharing so that you can take over and start this mystery journey.
All right. So, hello, everyone. It's so good to be back on your tours, Mara. Thank you so much for your lovely introduction. As Mara have said, this is not my first tour with Mara. It's my second one. So hello again to all of the familiar faces. I have presented the Halloween tour, Myths and Legends of Transylvania, and I'm back now for another super exciting tour, Mystery on the Orient Express. So I have to tell you, the first time we've discussed this, me and Mara, she was thinking like, we have to do something that keeps the people engaged and, invested into the story. So I have come up with a completely new script. So for those of you out there that were thinking that maybe this is along the plot lines of Agatha Christie's book, it's not. It's a plot that I've designed. And I've also integrated it into a travel tour so that you get to travel through Europe a little bit and feel like you're actually going on the Orient Express. And also, I will share a little bit of the history of this very, very important train. I am a Romanian guide. I forgot to tell you, I'm Georgiana, and it's so good to see everyone. A lot of people tonight. Okay, so our tour, as I've said, will always revolve around three main things all throughout the presentation. So if you get lost, I'll remind you which part are we on in each chapter. So it's history, It'll be travel because we want to have fun and we want to travel. And the third one, it'll be the murder mystery. So this is where all the fictional work comes in. It's where the plot starts. And I've gone beyond expectations. So I'm not just going to tell you something that I've invented. I've actually worked with an illustrator to put all of my ideas into a comic book, pretty much pages from a comic book. So different chapters. There are 5 chapters in total, and I cannot wait to share them with you. Okay. Before we start with the tour, I wanted to let you know that we've also prepared the quiz in order to make the whole experience a lot more interactive. So Mara is going to share the link to the quiz in the chat. And we've prepared some presents for you as well. For those of you that complete the quiz and get maximum score, I believe it's 15 points total for the maximum, have the opportunity to win a digital copy of the book Orient Express History. This book is a compilation of illustrations, history, real facts, everything that's related to the Orient Express. It has more than 500 pages, and it's an absolutely wonderful compilation of everything that this train has stood for throughout its history. So 5 people out of those that get maximum points will be chosen randomly and will be given this book from us. So make sure you fill in that quiz. And without further ado, we are starting our tour. Let's discuss what is the Orient Express. So the Orient Express, for those of you that don't know, even though I know you're familiar because I've seen Mara's poll, it's a luxury train service that connected Paris and Constantinople, and it was the figurehead of the Belle Epoque in Europe. It remains closely connected to European history throughout the 20th century, and it's one of the world's most famous trains today. All of the charm and the intrigue is mostly due to the fact that it appeared in a lot of movies and a lot of books. I have shared with you a photo, a drawing actually, with the first Orient Express in 1883. And the reason it is a drawing, it's because there are no photos back then. Let's see, why did this train become so famous and how did it gain its reputation for mystery and intrigue? Well, the story involves a brilliant entrepreneur, and you have him on my left here. His name was George Nagelmakers. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that name correctly because he is actually Belgian. And he had this ambitious vision for world travel. He had a knack for luxury, and he knew that the world was hungry for a better way. So his idea came to him in 1865. He was a banker's son. He knew that he wanted to build a train that would span a continent, running on a continuous ribbon of metal. And I'm quoting here from a book that depicted his biography, for more than 1,500 miles or 3,000 kilometers, for those of you that use kilometers. It was only in 1883 that he finally managed to start his company. His company bore the name Compagnie Internationale de Wagons-Lits. That means International Company of Sleeper Cars. Wagons-Lits, we'll see this name all throughout their presentation. It just means sleeper cars. Lit is bed in French. So it was in 1883 that he had finally had the inaugurative first journey of the Orient Express, the route that was going to link Paris to Istanbul. Back in the days, Istanbul was called Constantinople. We're still talking of the Ottoman Empire. And this was a train like never before. The name Orient Express was actually given by the newspapers because it was the link with the Orient. And then George just accepted it. He just adopted it. And here you have the emblem of his company. There are 2 golden lions. And the reason that he chose 2 golden lions will be revealed in the second slide. So let's see how George got his idea. I have here a poster of Pullman trains, which were running through the States. So he was once upon a time on a trip to America. He witnessed the many innovations in railway travel there. The chief of these innovations was George Pullman. He had unprecedented luxurious sleeper cars. And so he came back to Europe with a determined vision to have the same sleeper cars in Europe as well. He went so far as to propose to George to bring his sleeper cars in Europe, but he was absolutely refused. He didn't want to go into European business. When Pullman rejected him, Nagelmakers returned to Europe with one single plan: to copy the Pullman trains and to make his own even more luxurious train. These trains were so innovative at the time, and he was shocked when he saw those trains, because in Europe there was no such thing as being rested and comfortable on a train ride. So that was the epitome of luxury more than 100 years ago. Nagelmakers, George, he wasn't content just to bring sleeper cars in. He wanted to take it further. He wanted to create an experience, a luxury travel experience that would sweep passengers from Paris to Istanbul out of their minds. And he didn't want the train to stop at borders. All he had in mind was his passengers' comfort, and you have to think of Europe in terms of all of the countries that you would have to stop at the border and get checked in, not like today where you can travel without border checks. So he recruited a very powerful ally. He was Belgian, so he went to the king, Leopold II, King of Belgium, whose coat of arms are the two golden lions that we saw on the emblem earlier. And Belgium's government had for a very long time a big participation in the company's stocks. King Leopold himself was also a train enthusiast, so he pulled out some strings. He had family ties with all of Europe's royal family, so he got Nagelmakers the permission to run his train across international borders without any unnecessary interference. So the way it would go, the various national railways companies would provide the track, the stations, and the locomotives. So even today, the Orient Express changes locomotives in each country. The Wagon-Lit company, George's company, would provide the staff and the sleeper cars and the dining cars. So the experience. So passengers would pay for a first-class ticket and a supplement for the sleeper car. The revenue from the first-class ticket would go to the country, and the revenue from the supplement would go to the company. This is a copy from Le Figaro. Le Figaro is a prominent French newspaper. Again, a drawing because we didn't have any photos. And it's just to refer to the first trip ever of the Orient Express. And this is a drawing from inside the diner car. This is another photo of those times. Oh, sorry, a drawing, not a photo. And many journalists aboard came to publicly marvel at the train's luxury and beauty. Not only that, Nagelmakers was actually a very clever showman. So what he did, he arranged shoddy, decaying Pullman cars to stand in contrast on the tracks adjacent to the Express as it left Paris. He was still upset that he got a refusal to bring the cars into Europe. So aboard the train, the delighted passengers felt as though they've entered one of Europe's finest hotels. They marveled at the intricate wooden paneling, deluxe leather armchairs, silk sheets, wool blankets, and it was all for an 80-hour-long trip from Paris to Istanbul non-stop. This is the first poster related to the Orient Express. You have here a couple of the cities that the train ran to: Paris, Bucharest, of course, London, Paris, Constantinople. So far, it was unlike any other train that Europe had ever seen. Instead of bad service and unlikable travel, it was offering plush seats and silk sheets. So, of course, it rivaled even the most luxurious hotels of those time. There was also a restaurant, and that restaurant was fine dining. You could find in his menu oysters, caviar. Not only that, during the time that they were dining, the passengers were serenaded by musicians. another poster. This is just to reflect how many times the Orient Express ran a week. It was twice a week. It started running twice a week between Paris all the way until Istanbul. Later on, it was changed to 3 times. But at the beginning, and we'll talk a little bit about this more later when we will see the routes. In the beginning, there was no railway in Bulgaria. So after crossing Bucharest, after arriving in Bucharest, they would have to go into Varna, which is a port city. And from Varna, they would have to take the ferry to actually reach Constantinople. So this route, to be able to be fully completed, they had to wait for a railway. So it's truly innovative work of the time. And let's see a little bit the chronology of the Orient Express, because I've told you, you cannot speak about the Orient Express and not put it in the context of the European history of those times. So it was started in 1883, ran until 1914, and that's regarded as the golden age of the Orient Express. 1914, as you know, marks the beginning of the First World War. All the train services were stopped. After the First World War finishes, it goes into the Belle Epoque, the interwar period, that was the most flourishing period in the Orient Express history. And it actually starts bringing in more routes. You'll hear of the Simplon Orient Express, the original Orient Express, and the Arlberg Orient Express. Just quickly running through them, the Simplon offered a different route that would avoid Germany. We are talking post-First World War, when Germany had been defeated, but the Allies didn't want a train that passes again through Germany. So they decided to go through a different tunnel. Then we had the original that passed through Germany and went all the way to Bucharest and then further on to Constantinople, Istanbul, and the Arlberg Orient Express, which was pretty much the Alpine route. The European tourists starting seeing the benefits of traveling on the Orient Express in the wintertime through Switzerland to go to the winter resorts. And the Arlberg was running on 3 out of the 4 days that the Orient Express was not running a week, because it ran 3 times a week. After the Second World War, George's Knucklemakers company was starting to see failure slowly, because there was air flight to consider now. There were a lot more cars. People were a lot poorer, and the company itself had most of its cars destroyed. Half of the cars were destroyed in the Second World War. So the world was shifting. The world was changing. Not as many noble families, but a lot more prominent middle class. So slowly, easily, gradually, the luxurious Orient Express started decaying. The company itself moved into other business ventures. So until 1977, when the last original Orient Express ran. So until then, they have started selling and giving to auction their sleeper cars. After 1977 until 1991, the Orient Express route this time, so not the original trains, were incorporated by national railways. So you would still see Orient Express in schedules of train everywhere, but it would not have been the original Orient Express. In 1991, I've chosen this date because that's when Bucharest stops receiving the Orient Express, so the route shortens. But in this time, another privately owned company called Venice Simplon Orient Express starts, and that's in 1982. The classic Orient Express continues to run up until 2019. 2019 is the last recorded route of the Orient Express. That's when it officially stopped. The one that we have today, it's privately owned. Again, it's Venice Simplon Orient Express, and we will talk about this particular company later. Okay, so we have here a photo just to put in perspective what types of route the Orient Express would take. So it would start in Paris. Follow the red line here. That's the original one that started in 1883. Goes from Paris, Strasbourg, Munich, Vienna, Budapest, Bucharest. Initially went to Varna in Bulgaria and then took the ferry across the Black Sea because there were no railways. After the railway were constructed, it went straight from Bucharest to Istanbul for a much shorter ride. Second one, the Simplon that we talked about, the one that avoids Germany. You see it passes through the Simplon tunnel, which has been constructed between Switzerland and Italy to facilitate faster pass through the Alps. And this one would have connected Paris, Milan, Venice, Belgrade, Sofia, and Istanbul. This happened until 1977. The Arlberg, the Alpine route, told you about, passes through Zurich, Innsbruck, Vienna. So most of the winter resorts on this route goes all the way to Budapest, where it's split in two. It can either go to Bucharest or take Belgrade to Istanbul or to Greece. Venice Simplon, which is the one that ran this route until 2005. That's the much newer one. And the OBB, that's the classic train, the second class, third class. It was integrated in the Interrail, the European railways. Nothing special about this train, so nothing that you expect to see from an Orient Express. It ran Paris, Vienna, and then it was gradually shortened, Strasbourg, Vienna, and until in 2009, it stopped, unfortunately. So tonight we are taking a fictional route. We are starting in Paris, just like the Orient Express would have started initially. And then we are going to Zurich. We're passing through Innsbruck, Vienna. We're not going to stay or stop here, not focusing on these cities, stopping in Budapest and focusing here, visiting Budapest, and going all the way until Bucharest. So for tonight's mystery, for our murder mystery, our final destination is Bucharest. It will not be Istanbul, and we will find out why. So if you're ready to start the murder mystery, I want to tell you something important. I will be your narrator tonight, and I want you to be in the role of a detective. So you are a detective that has been hired by a Romanian count. That's why the terminus of your destination is Bucharest and not Istanbul, to help him in a delicate matter. You will be watching the events as they unfold in front of you, and me as a narrator will give you more details about the characters that we encounter along the way. So if you're ready to start, what do you have to do first? You have to look at the timetable. So if we're talking about the 1930s, this is how a timetable would have looked like. You decide which train to take, you take a look at the time, you get your ticket ready. And this is a ticket from 1898. As you can see, it was handwritten. So everything was luxurious. It was signed by the Directeur Général himself. You don't see this too often these days. And it was called carte personnelle, just a ticket. It was all French, and you have the emblem here. And so you have your ticket ready. What do you do with the ticket? You go on to the train. So this is how the train would have looked like even in the 1930s. You are greeted by the train's conductor. You present him the ticket and you climb aboard. So on my left side, I have a much newer photograph. Of course, this is from our days. As the train conductor helps the lady, she's wearing high heels, she's wearing a fancy dress. This is how you are expected to dress even nowadays if you are going aboard the Orient Express. And here on my right side, I just wanted to share a photo of the conductors back in the days. This is from the 1920s. And they didn't have the blue uniforms that we see today. The uniforms were chocolate brown. Fun fact, on the collar, there was a number which passengers could write down if they had any complaints. Each sleeper car had their own conductor, their own butler, dedicated conductor, who welcomed the passengers, who converted the couches into beds at night, and who collected the travel documents for border control. As a wagon-lit conductor, you were required to speak at least 3 languages. So we're talking about Europe. It wasn't that uncommon for people to be to speak more languages. You needed to speak at least French, German, and English, of course. All right, so your journey on the Orient Express starts in Paris, and together, me, the narrator, and your travel guide tonight, we are traveling from Paris to Zurich, Budapest, Sinaia. If this doesn't ring a bell, we will discuss about this later. And finally, your terminus will be in Bucharest. So we start in Paris. Remember that at the beginning, I told you that all of these chapters will revolve around three things: history, travel, and murder mystery, the fictional part. So I will always start with the travel part. So we're talking about Paris, or Gare de l'Est, which is the eastern train station in Paris. And you cannot talk about the Orient Express without talking about this particular train station. So since 1883 onwards, this was the starting point of the legendary train for more than 100 years. And it actually starts here even today as well. This is one of the 6 major train stations that you can find in Paris today. And it is mostly known for the semicircular facade that allows the roof to be seen behind it. Of course, it has gone through several renovations. What you see today, it's the restored part that happened in 2007. This is a photo from how the train station would have looked like on the day of the first journey of the Orient Express. So officially, the Orient Express left Paris in 1883, October 4th. Of course, it was festively decorated for the occasion, and there were around 30 people invited for the inauguration. There were government directors, diplomats, journalists, railway directors. The host was, of course, our Belgian banker's son, George Nakkelmakers, who was the founder of the Wagon Lit, and other of his invitees were Austrian, Hungarian ministries of the public works, and of course, of the Ottoman embassy. There were also known writers on this train whose job was to document what they saw and make it known across publications. All of the guests lavishly praised the onboard comfort, and they particularly emphasized how this new service made the world a lot smaller. Unlike what you might believe, initially the the cars were not made in steel. They were made in teak wood. Teak wood is actually very, very strong type of wood. They were 75 meters long, and they would have typically a locomotive, 2 sleeping cars, a dining car, and 2 baggage cars. It was only from 1922 onwards that they've replaced the wood carriages with steel carriages and gave them the look that you are so familiar with today. The interior of the train was designed in Art Deco style, so very lavish, luxurious. Was the style preferred at the beginning of the century, and it was nicknamed from then on as Le Train Bleu, or the blue train, because of its colors. Today, they are also seen on the Simplon Orient Express because those cars are actually restored cars from this train. There are no second-class carriages now, but they used to be second-class carriages, which were introduced after the economic crisis. So this is a German fold-out of how the dining car would have looked on the inside. So remember, you are on your adventure, you have boarded a train, you have given your ticket to the conductor. So this is your experience inside of the train. It's the first time you come aboard the Orient Express, and in the 1930s, this is what you would have encountered. So if you're going through the dining car, expect the kitchen, expect the butler's service area, of course, the whole dining area, and they were very civilized for those times. They had a separate smoking lounge. This has been introduced in Europe much, much later as a rule in all restaurants. So they were very much ahead of their time. And the types of room that you would expect in an Orient Express, you are familiar with the twin cabins, where you have two beds, one on top of the other. They would fold out to be created as beds. Initially, they start as couches. They have the wash, the sink. You do not have a shower, of course, but you do have a bathrobe and slippers. If you want to go more luxurious, you want to travel a little bit more comfortable and have the money, you can adjoin two of these cabins. So you have one cabin just for just as a sleeping area, and then the second one you just keep it as a couch. So they are interconnected, and that's called the suite. So this is how your cabin looks like. You are inside the train, you take your seat, you lay your luggage down, and this couch will be turned for you by the conductor when the night comes. Before we get going, I wanted to share some of the photos from today's train, but as I've mentioned, they have been restored to replicate historical reality. So everything is restored. Everything has been handmade by craftsmen, by established craftsmen in Europe. There is a bathrobe, there are slippers, everything matches. It is Art Deco. You see the sparkling clean bathroom today. And this is the Grand Suite. So from 2018, the current Orient Express has 3 Grand Suites. They weren't there in the original train, but I wanted to share these photos for their design and just to get an idea of the type of luxury those people enjoyed and wanted in their train ride. So unlike today, where the train stops and takes a walk through each city that they visit, they were riding the Orient Express just for the train. They didn't stop and leisurely walked through the cities. They didn't want to see the cities necessarily. So yeah, Art Deco style all around. Look at the wood paneling, how nicely done it is. The flowers, the craftsmanship that went into it, the amount of hours of work put into creating just a single wall. It's amazing. You have to admire this. And of course, if you're going into the dining car, you are expected to wear a suit and tie. You are going to take part into a formal dinner. So if you don't have good shoes on or a tie as a person or a suit or a dress, you're not accepted. One last thing that I want to share here before we start with the murder mystery. It's one very important train car. So through the 2 world wars, the Orient Express service was seriously limited. One single car has a fascinating symbolic role. So after the First World War, you know, Germans, they were forced to surrender. The Allies had won, and one Allied commander signed the armistice of 1918 in his own personal carriage. His name was Ferdinand Foch, and this particular car, after the First World War, was displayed in French museums for because it was where the German officers signed their defeat. Later on in 1940s, after the successful invasion of France by Hitler, the same wagon, by the direct order of Adolf Hitler, was moved to the exact site so they could sign the defeat of France in the same exact car in 1940. 4 years later, we all know Hitler lost. His loss seemed imminent. So what he did, he ordered that the car be blown up, lest it became a trophy of the Allies once more. So talk about revenge and vengeful personalities. But we are here tonight. We are doing a mystery on the Orient Express. And you are in Paris, you are boarding the train, you are already inside the train, and let's get to know the characters. So we have a couple of characters tonight that I will introduce one by one. The first character is Miss Baudelaire. It's this lady right here. Miss Baudelaire is a retired French artist. So she was born in Paris, and she travels just to keep her time, her retired period, entertained. So she travels just for the fun of it. She wants to go to Istanbul, not Bucharest, but she is boarding the Orient Express. So we have the train conductor. Welcome, Miss Baudelaire. Your cabin is number 2. Do try to remember the number of the cabins because they are important throughout the story. So you see Miss Baudelaire. That's the first person that you see in the train that you get acquainted with, and the second person is Miss Popescu. Miss Popescu, it's a beautiful Romanian actress. She boards the Orient Express because she wants to meet her father in Budapest. She is traveling to Romania to visit her mother's home country. She's never traveled to Romania before. She was actually born in Paris herself, but her mother was from Romania. So we have Mr. Ford. Welcome, Miss Popescu. Congratulations on your last movie. Oh, thank you so much. Please keep an eye out on the sequel. Miss Popescu's cabin is number 3. So now you know 2 characters. The train leaves Paris, and while in the dining car, you overhear the discussion of the 2 ladies. So Miss Popescu knows Miss Baudelaire because she's actually a huge fan. Hello, Miss Baudelaire. I'm a huge fan. And Miss Baudelaire is a little bit, oh, hello. Yes, well, thank you. You're too kind, darling. My name is Alice Popescu. I love your paintings. So we find out that Miss Baudelaire is actually a retired artist, but she's a painter. And Miss Popescu knows her. Our first scene, first night on the train, finishes with you witnessing Miss Baudelaire crying. Me, the narrator, tells you that Miss Baudelaire is crying because Miss Popescu reminded her of her own daughter. We find out that when she was younger, Miss Baudelaire actually gave birth to a daughter that she was forced to give out for adoption because the person she had the child with was already married. It was the result of an affair. So she was forced, in order for him to keep his career, he forced her to give up the child and put her out for adoption. So when she saw Miss Popescu, her youth, her enthusiasm, and she just thought, she must be the same age as my daughter right now, wherever she might be. So that's why we see her saddened and crying. And this is where our first scene finishes. We have 2 characters so far. One by one, we'll introduce, you'll get acquainted with all of them. So we leave Paris, we arrive in Zurich. Zurich is actually not a very frequent stop on the Orient Express initial route. It was more on the Alpine route, more typical to stop the Arlberg Orient Express, and the station where you would stop in Zurich bore the name Zurich Enge. It wasn't the central station of Zurich. As I've mentioned, people that would go aboard the Alpine route were looking for fashionable resorts like Davos or St. Moritz. They were very popular among the British elite. And of course, Zurich was a main city on the itinerary for its economic importance. This is a photo of how the train station would have looked like at the beginning of the 20th century. Of course, a drawing, sorry, not a photo. And if you find yourself in Zurich, we are now in the travel part of our chapter, you will probably see these 2 iconic towers. Now, Zurich overall is an upmarket banking city. It's the financial capital of Switzerland, and therefore it comes as no surprise that it was often labeled as the most expensive city in the world. Zurich is famous today for luxurious lifestyle, high-end shopping, and fancy chocolates, of course. So yeah, of course, it had to be part of the Orient Express and the people that boarded the Orient Express in those times. The 2 iconic towers actually belong to the Grossmünster Church. It's a church built in the 12th century. It took them more than a century to finish constructing it. It is medieval architecture. And it was actually the ground zero for the Reformation in Switzerland in the 16th century. Today, there's a museum depicting these events, so you can visit it if you ever find yourself in Zurich. Conveniently located next to the church is the Niederdorf neighborhood. This is the Niederdorf alley. As I said, right under the towers of the church. It's a young and exciting neighborhood. It's very popular among the locals because cars are not allowed on the cobblestones, and it's right by the bank of the river. It's one of those trendy neighborhoods, a lot of design shops, and at night it turns into a party neighborhood. So yeah, very favored amongst tourists. And if we're in Zurich, I wanted to share with you another story of the Orient Express that happened in 1929, when the Orient Express got stuck in snow. If this sounds familiar, if you've watched the Orient Express movie, bear with me. Let me tell you the whole story of how it got stuck in snow. So there are only 20 passengers aboard the Orient Express at that time. It had been snowing all throughout the way. But as the train was passing from Bulgaria to Turkey, the snowflakes started turning the size of child's hands. So gradually, the snow started gathering more and more, and the train was forced to slow to a crawl. Some 50 miles before actually arriving at the destination, the train stopped completely. It came to a complete halt, and the passengers, which were a mixture of diplomats, priests, businessmen, and their wives, all looked at each other like, what are we going to do? The train already had 46 years since it first started, so no such event was ever recorded. They were desperate. Sometime later, they found from the train conductor that what was worse, the landlines were also down because of the snow. They could not do absolutely anything than wait for the blizzard to stop. It took 3 days for the blizzard to stop. They were all marooned in the train. So after 3 days, after they peered through the windows and they saw they were completely drenched in snow, but the snow had stopped, they thought to themselves, okay, we have to do something. We can either stay here and die, or we can try and make our way through the snow outside of the train and maybe get a chance at survival. So they picked up shovels, pickaxes, iron bars. They dug outwards from the engine where it was a little bit more warm, so the snow was melted. And they started digging through snow. Of course, it was exhausting work. They took turns into building this tunnel, and it took them 2 days and 2 nights of intense labor until they could finally come outside into the open air. So they broke through. It was dusk. They saw the lights of a distant village, but because it was, it was almost getting dark, they said, okay, we'll rest here for some time and go to the village in the morning. However, their luck was not with them yet, because when they went to the village, the villagers just looked at them in dismay like intruders. There was barely enough food in there to feed them, so they couldn't manage. They didn't get much from the villagers. They only took a couple of eggs, just some skinny hands, and that was it. They had to return to the train. You can imagine, like, you think you find your saviors, but they don't offer you any sympathy, so they started getting even more desperate. One of the ladies actually tried to commit suicide. So in desperation, they were all wealthy people. They pooled their money and they went back to the villagers. So with the newfound gold, the villagers this time were much more willing to help. So they sold the travelers guns, hens, goats, sheep, and a sledge full of logs, of wooden logs. Now that they had provisions, they could go back to the train and survive for a few more days. They had a pack of wolves come in because now they have livestock on the train, so they were attracted to the smell. But fortunately, they had guns too, so that helped them in being protected. It took another 3 days for the Turkish soldiers to finally arrive. They managed to get a snowplow that was powerful enough to make a tunnel so that the train would be finally free. So this story, of course, made the headline of 1929 in Europe. Everyone was talking about it, especially because there were very important people on the train that got stuck in there. And this whole story inspired a very, very popular writer and a favorite of mine. Her name is Agatha Christie. I decided to share a photo of her younger self because all the time you see her when she was much, much older. And I think she's very cute like this. So this event stimulated Agatha to write Murder on the Orient Express. This is the first edition of the book that came out in 1934 and has as the main detective Hercule Poirot. And here's a photo of David Suchet. He is a British actor. He is the one that played Hercule Poirot for more than 25 years. And in my opinion, is the one that embodies Hercule Poirot the best. But I may be biased because, you know, I've watched all of the series, and he is very, very well connected to the character. However, another story makes headlines just 1 year after the book came out. So it came out in 1934, and in 1935, the first ever documented murder on the Orient Express happens. It was a wealthy Romanian woman that was traveling to Paris to meet her husband that gets killed. Her name was Maria Forcășanu. The name is not important. We know that she was a wealthy designer. She was the one that developed the Romanian School of Art. And one night she was pushed through the window of the train. So her body was found by the Austrian officers by the railways. Her belongings were also found with her body, but there were two key important parts missing. So it was her silver fox scarf and her platinum watch. The police, of course, investigated, the international police investigated, but they weren't able to find the murderer. It was, in all intents and purposes, her travel companion that pushed her out of the window, but they couldn't find him. 2 years later, by just luck, the police officer that took care of this case was in Sunday Mass, and he notices the silver fox scarf on a lady attending church. Attending the Sunday Mass. So he goes to her and asks her, where do you get the silver fox scarf from? And she confesses that she has it from her 23-year-old student by the name of Karl Strasser. So this is how police manages to find the young boy. They also, when they search him, they also find the platinum watch. And he initially was sentenced to death, but ended up being imprisoned for life for the first ever recorded murder on the Orient Express. There were other murders throughout the 20th century, but you can find more about those murders in the book that I told you about, Orient Express History. Okay, so you are in Zurich. You've arrived. The train arrives in Zurich, and here we have another character that enters, that you meet. It's our third character. His name is naturally Mr. Grunder. He's a sulky Swiss banker who works for the National Bank of Switzerland. You can see by his face, he's not particularly happy about this journey. He's not here to travel for leisure. He is clearly on business. So Mr. Ford welcomes him. Hello, Mr. Grunder. Welcome aboard. Your cabin is number 6. Don't forget about the number of the cabins. And this is the first time ever we see Mr. Ford. So Mr. Ford is our train conductor. Here, he has a very angry expression, and that's because he actually recognizes Mr. Grunder. Mr. Grunder did not recognize him, but we find out now that Mr. Ford wasn't always a train conductor. When he was younger, he took a credit for a mortgage from the Swiss National Bank, and the bank clerk that granted him this credit was Mr. Grunder himself. He was also the one that convinced him to take the credit in francs, in Swiss francs, instead of dollars, which greatly appreciated after the economic crisis. And he ended up not being able to repay back his debt, his mortgage. So not being able, he lost his house, he lost his family, and lost his wife and his family. So he had a little bit of a revenge attitude towards Mr. Grunder. But we'll see how that unfolds a little bit later. So Mr. Ford passes through the dining car. We find here Miss Baudelaire, the retired French artist, and Miss Popescu, our Romanian actress. And the intrigue deepens. So you again notice another discussion. You thought it was just going to be like a regular discussion, but no, Miss Baudelaire looks at Mr. Grunder and very rudely says, "You here?" And Mr. Grunder looks at her and he says, "Oh, it's been such a long time. You find out from me, from the narrator, that it was Mr. Grunder that convinced Miss Baudelaire to give up her child in her youth. So he was the father of her daughter. He was the one that was married as a Swiss banker. He had a career to pursue, so he could not afford such a scandal." Our chapter finishes with them talking. Mr. Grunder wants to tell her something. He has actually pursued an investigation of his own throughout the years, and he has found out where their daughter is and who adopted her. "But of course, I need to tell you something," says Mr. Grunder. "I have nothing more to say to you. The past is in the past." She has no intention to revisit old memories. It was a very troubled period for her. She suffered a lot. She did not want to go through that again. So she shuts him down. With this discussion in mind, we'll leave Zurich and we move on to Budapest. And in Budapest, you arrive in Neugati train station. This is the station where the Orient Express would always pass through Budapest twice a week. And this is where it continued on from Vienna, Budapest to Romania, and eventually Istanbul. This particular train station has two brick pavilions, one for arrival and one for departure. And in between the pavilions, you have this iron canopy hall, great hall, where the tracks run. So all of these tunnels correspond to the tracks. The person that actually constructed the iron canopy was Gustave Eiffel. If you don't know who he is, he's also the one that built the Eiffel Tower in Paris. So we know that the Orient Express always received special service over regular trains. The inaugural train of the Orient Express, however, had a more special treatment from the Hungarians. That's when a gypsy orchestra went aboard the train, and the passengers were just delighted by these wild charmers. If you've never seen a gypsy orchestra perform, I will share with you a link later. So this is the inside of the train station. It's not very luxurious. There's nothing special about it. This is the iron canopy that was designed by Gustave Eiffel. And in Budapest is where the route would split in two. Either go to Bucharest or go to Belgrade, on maybe to Greece, but both routes would eventually arrive in Istanbul. It's a photo of the train station, of the Neugati train station more than 100 years ago. And if you find yourself in Budapest, make sure you don't miss the Székely chain bridge. Now, this chain bridge has been built some 30 years before the first ever journey of the Orient Express, so a little bit older, and it's impossible to miss if you're on a river cruise in Budapest, or even if you're just visiting. It's one of their most iconic bridges. It's the one that links the two capitals that formed Budapest today, Buda and Pest, and it was designed by an English engineer and constructed by a Scottish engineer. This bridge, same like the Orient Express, had an enormous significance in the country's economic, social, and cultural life. It was many times compared to Brooklyn Bridge in New York, and it even elevated the country. It became a symbol of advancement, of national awakening. Much as the Orient Express itself, it linked the East to the West. This is a photo of the bridge after the Second World War. If you remember, the Second World War was the most destructive, both for the Orient Express, but as well for a lot of European capitals. However, they managed to rebuild the bridge in just 4 years. So looked like this in 1945 and 1949. It was brand new again, sorry. These lions, they are the ones that guard the Székely chain bridge. And if they do look familiar to you, that's because they were built to resemble the lions in Trafalgar Square in London. Well, the only difference is that these ones are in stone and the ones in Trafalgar Square are in bronze. The Orient Express We're going into our history part now after traveling through Budapest for a little bit. The Orient Express was known for many names all throughout his history, and one such name that contributed to its aura of mystery was Spy Express. The lady in the photo is actually Mata Hari, one of the most famous women spies of all times. And the reason why it was called the Spy Express is because the border controls were kept to a minimum for the comfort of the guests. Of course, this special kind of comfort draw very fast a different type of clientele, and those were the spies. She used the Orient Express for her dance tour, for her European dance tour. It also became a fictional location it also became the location for a fictional spy, and that's James Bond in Ian Fleming's novel From Russia with Love. And we have a lesser known spy by his name, Robert Baden-Powell. He's actually the founder of the Boy Scouts, and he is known for the fact that he managed to hide sketches of the Dalmatian coastal fortifications in drawings of butterflies. So he just, disguised himself as a naturalist. Don't mind me, I'm here drawing butterflies, but if you look here closely, these are the sketches of a fortification along the Dalmatian coast. Dalmatian coast is in Croatia. So yeah, pretty smart. You can find his book if you want to look into his work furthermore. For now, we are back in the Niugati train station in Budapest. You might have recognized the iron canopy, and you're on for your third chapter of the story. This is where a fourth character comes in, and his name is Mr. Horvat. Mr. Ford welcomes him. Hello, Mr. Horvat. Welcome aboard. Your cabin is number 5. If you remember, number 5 is right next to Mr. Grunder's, the Swiss banker cabin, which was number 6. Great, thank you. We find out that Mr. Horvat was a Hungarian industrialist. He made his fortune through some dirty deals with the government's other corrupt politicians. And he is actually meeting his daughter on this train to go to Romania. He was married to a Romanian woman, and that's why they're visiting Romania. That was her home country. And his daughter had never seen Romania herself. If you remember, Miss Popescu was born in France. So that's why they're traveling to Romania themselves. Before getting to his cabin, Mr. Horvat encounters Mr. Grunder. We find out that both of them are in a feud because Mr. Horvat, due to his connections, corruptions, embezzlement, he has done some damage to some Swiss banks, especially the National Swiss Bank. So Mr. Grunder actually travels to Romania to meet with some Romanian lawyers that told him they finally have proof that can bury Mr. Horvat once and for all and put him in prison. So Mr. Grunder tells him, I never expected to find you here. This time I'll make sure you get what you deserve. Mark my words. Mr. Horvat, of course, he has the arrogance of corrupt people in general. Well, I'm sure you can try, but you don't know who you're meddling with. Honest men are not that powerful. And that's true even to today's time, unfortunately. And our scene finishes here with Mr. Horvat talking to his daughter, Miss Popescu. So are you ready to discover where your mom was born? Yes, Daddy, I know it'll make me cherish her memory even more. So they are on a nostalgic train ride, not a travel one. They both have recently suffered a loss. One other thing that her father chooses to share with her is that, my darling, I need to tell you something else. I think this time they have solid proof against me. That Swiss arrogant has finally did it. They might arrest me when we arrive in Bucharest. Of course, she is shocked. No, Daddy, I can't lose you too. What are we going to do? She's just lost a parent. She doesn't want to lose another one. So you move on into your journey. On another small stop in between Budapest and Bucharest, you stop in Timisoara. Timisoara is border city in Romania. It is traditionally a stop on the Orient Express route, but they would just get down for a little bit to stretch their legs for a short walk. We find all of our 4 characters. So Miss Popescu, Miss Butler, Mr. Grunder, and Mr. Horvat on a casual walk. And you have Mr. Grunder here looking at the relationship between Mr. Horvat and Miss Popescu rather unhappily. He seems troubled by this situation. So he's not, he's angry that the 2 of them are hand in hand and that they have such a good relationship. But we don't know why. We will find out why, and that's important for the story. So please remember it. And then we have Miss Baudelaire with her French flair. She goes to Mr. Horvat and tells him, "You have a lovely daughter, but I have to say, she looks absolutely nothing like you." What would you say? What would be your reaction if someone would come and say, "Your kid doesn't look like you"? Well, Mr. Horvat's reaction was, good enough to match her question. And he said, "Well, you're completely right, but I'm actually happy for it because she must be getting her looks from her biological parents, I suppose." So this is when you find out that Miss Popescu was adopted and that Mr. Horvat, together with his Romanian wife, adopted her while they were on vacation in Paris. They have heard of this recently abandoned sweet girl in the hospital, and because they couldn't have any children of their own, they decided to take her on. You might be wondering, if she's his daughter, why doesn't she bear his name? And the reason for that is that she decided to take her mother's name. Popescu is a Romanian last name because her father's name was so tainted. She didn't want the unwanted attraction from his corrupt name. So she wanted to be like a clean actress, so to say. Miss Baudelaire is obviously baffled. She looks at him like, not a lot of people will go around and say, "Oh yeah, my kids are adopted." So she's like, "Oh, your daughter is adopted?" And this is what actually Mr. Grunder has been trying to tell her from the beginning, but she doesn't know that yet. So Mr. Grunder in his investigation has discovered where his daughter was and who adopted her. He knew that Miss Popescu is actually his biological daughter, but he had mixed feelings for it. That's why he looked so angry earlier, because he hated Mr. Horvat. He wanted to put him in jail, but at the same time, he didn't want to, make his daughter suffer. He wanted to get to know her if possible. So he was just looking for the right opportunity to do so. And at the end of the scene, back in the train, when everyone else was out, Mr. Ford goes into Mr. Grunder's cabin. You have here cabin number 6. Remember, he was angry and he blamed him for losing his family. Well, that happened. So he wanted to take his revenge. What we know, the only thing that we know so far, is that he pours some white powder into his drinking water found inside his cabin. And then he shuts the door behind him and leaves. What did he put in there? We don't know, but you continue your journey, and your 4th destination is Sinaia. You arrive at Sinaia train station, and you discover that Sinaia is actually a mountain resort. It's very beautifully nestled between the Carpathian Mountains, and it was built by the first king of Romania, the first royal family, when they built their summer residence there. This is a photo that depicts the first royal family of Romania, the first king, Carol I, and the first queen, Queen Elizabeth. They were invited at the end of the 1800s to Romania, and he is the one that proclaimed the Kingdom of Romania. So that's when Romania started existing as a country. The erudite royal couple welcomed any foreign delegation with open arms, and actually in 1883, when the first Orient Express passed through Sinaia, they invited all of the guests inside their summer residence. The direct connection that this train posed with Paris was of great importance for the kingdom. The other people here, this is King Ferdinand, is the 2nd king of Romania, and King Carol II, which is the 3rd king of Romania. So King Carol the First built his summer residence, and you know, most of us build our summer residence, so we're going to be there for 2-3 months. He didn't go overboard with it. I'm joking, of course. Of course he did. They had to make their mark as the first royal family of a new kingdom. So this is actually the first castle in in Europe, sorry. So the first castle in Europe to be fully electrified. They even built a local source, a micro power plant next to the palace for this exact purpose. No other castle in Europe was electrified before this. There's also a central heating system, a centralized vacuum cleaner, and an elevator. It has more than 170 rooms, many dedicated to world cultures, and 30 bathrooms. So it was officially opened in 1883, but it was finished in 1914, which marks the year of the First World War. This is a closer look to on the castle. The style is neo-Renaissance, and they've also inspired themselves from German castles, the Gothic Revival German castles, because the royal family was of German descent. It looks a little bit similar to the Neuschwanstein castle in Germany. But in my opinion, it's prettier on the inside. You get to see a lot more rooms. So these are just 2 photos from the inner court, from the king's desk. But if you visit Pelish Castle today, you will be amazed by the level of details and elements of furnishings that you can still admire. There's paintings, statues, furniture, arms, ivory, porcelain, tapestries, rugs everywhere. There's even the king's collection of more than 4,000 pieces of armor that on display that you can see. So yeah, definitely don't miss Pelish Castle if you ever find yourself in Romania or on a journey on the Orient Express. And the reason for that is that the Orient Express in function today stops in Sinaia. And this is a photo from 2019 from the train station. And of course, it's a big celebration every time the train passes any location. And as back in the days, it was met with more celebration than usual, the tradition is still very much alive today. And the Romanian orchestra actually performed for the guests of the Orient Express in 2019. Fortunately, that was also the last time this train ran. 2020 marked the pandemic. And this year, tickets are on sale on their website. You can get them, but you never know if it's going to happen or not. So notice all of the people that came out just to take a photo with the train. It's absolutely crazy. Another way that the newspaper called the Orient Express, besides the Spy Express that we've talked earlier, was the King of Trains and the Train of Kings. When you go aboard the Orient Express, even today, you are met with the red carpet. That is not a joke. And every time you go out of the train, in each of its stops, they will lay down a red square carpet every time for you to step on the red carpet first. So you are treated as royalty. You know, they want to keep the special status. And to be honest, for the amount of money that you pay for the tickets, they better be lay out the red carpet. It's called the Train of Kings because all European royalty at one point went aboard it. It was the most exclusive, luxurious experience that they could get at that time. And you had, I mean, anyone would ride on the Orient Express. So let's see what other royalty besides King Leopold. So King Leopold II of Belgium is the one that helped found the Orient Express. We've talked about him at the beginning. And him alongside King Carol II of Romania. He was the 3rd king of Romania. I know that's a little bit confusing, but both of them were known as the seducers of the train. So in their personal life, both these kings were known for the number of their mistresses, to put it lightly. So they would be seen aboard the Orient Express quite often. Another king was King Ferdinand I of Bulgaria, and he became famous because while the train was passing through Bulgaria, through his country, he was a train enthusiast. So he said, okay, you know what? I want to conduct this train. He had absolutely no experience with conducting a train, but he was a king. You know how kings are. They're like, you cannot tell me I cannot do anything. So the conductors, of course, were very afraid. They're like, okay, let him do his job. It is said that he drove the train at top speed through Bulgaria, through his country. And they were very, very frightened by the situation, because it was not safe. He was going crazy. So that's what he's most famous for now. And other royalty is, of course, Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. This photo, I think, is from the 1950s, 1960s. We have President Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th US president that came at the beginning of the 20th century and took a train ride on the Orient Express. Winston Churchill and Anthony Eden. I had to share a photo of their butlers. This guy looks absolutely horrified. He is stressed out. He is probably delivering tea. And of course, we have another butler here that had the box full of cigars ready for Mr. Churchill. We have famous actresses, Marlene Dietrich, Brigitte Bardot, very famous European actresses, and other personalities of those times. Mahatma Gandhi, Sigmund Freud. Really sorry for the photos. They have the copy mark on them. That's because they belong to the company of Compagnie Internationale de Wagons from their own personal archives. It's very hard to come across these photos on a regular Google search. So we have arrived in Sinaia. We are back to our story. We stop in Sinaia to go for a walk and to go for a tour of the Peleș Castle. So we have been invited by King Carol as honored guests. So let's see the inside. However, if you think we're missing a character here, that's because Mr. Grunder could not join the party. And Mr. Ford goes to check on Mr. Grunder because he was worried of what happened. Or maybe he was just faking his worry, because we know that he did something bad on the other scene when he put that wet powder in his water. And he comes back to the group and says, go on, continue the tour without Mr. Grunder. He said he will not be joining because he doesn't feel very good today. So the rest of the people, they look a little bit concerned. Miss Baudelaire is rubbing her chin. She's thinking that's rather odd. It's not of him to miss something like this. Mr. Horvath is in the same situation, but he was rather happy that he won't be seeing Mr. Grunder's face today. He wasn't a big fan. And inside the castle, Miss Popescu actually asked Miss Baudelaire, so what do you think happened to Mr. Grunder? He seemed fine yesterday for yesterday's dinner. Well, Miss Baudelaire snapped back. His evil spirit is finally catching up on him. Miss Popescu did not expect such an answer full of hatred. She was just left wondering. She moves on. And then everyone returns back to the train. You have finished the walking tour of Peleș Castle. And Miss Popescu is actually the first one to board a bit earlier than the rest because she had to get her wardrobe ready. Remember, she was an actress and they were getting close to Bucharest and she hadn't even packed all of her dresses yet. A little bit later, after the train started moving again, everyone met on the dining car for lunch. And Miss Popescu is the one that starts the conversation. She was curious what happened. So she says, I will go check if he's all right. We haven't heard from him in so long. She invites Mr. Ford to go along with her. And she knocks on the door. Mr. Grunder, are you there? Everyone is worried about you. Mr. Ford, he knew why Mr. Grunder was feeling ill, so he just let her there knocking on the door by herself. And the train, we are getting, now you saw the 5th chapter of our comic book, and we're getting ready to reveal the 6th. But I have to tell you something about Bucharest, your terminus for tonight. That's where you're supposed to arrive. The train will move on from Bucharest. In Romania, we don't have a central train station. Our train station is called Gara de Nord, which literally means the North Station. It was started in the 19th century. And traditionally, Romania and France always had a very good connection. In Belle Époque, Bucharest was known as Little Paris. It was a cosmopolitan city and it flourished. Ever since 1883, the company of the Orient Express, the Compagnie Internationale, pushed the Romanian royal family to build a central station, something that would look more appealing to the guests than what you see today. But unfortunately, the plans never came to be fulfilled. This is the inside of the train station of the Gara de Nord today. And this is just a drawing of the plans that were supposed to be Bucharest Central Station. All the time, the plans were disrupted by wars, by internal conflict. It was supposed to join all of the other European capitals as far as train station go. You see here, Paris, Vienna, Munich. It was supposed to resemble a proper European central station, but unfortunately, we don't have it. This is an old photo. It's from the beginning of the 1900s. It's just a ticket office of the company of the Orient Express in Bucharest, Bureau de Voyage. That just means ticketing office in Romanian. Just so you understand that Romania was an important destination for the Orient Express, they had their ticketing office in Bucharest too. And if you find yourself in Bucharest today, or even on the Orient Express, but not in Belle Époque, much later when Romania was communist, you could have visited the Palace of Parliament in Bucharest. This is, we as Romanians are a little bit conflicted about it, because it was just a megalomaniac project of our communist leader. It is the heaviest building in the world. It has more than 9 billion pounds. That translates to 4 million tons. And it is the second largest administrative building in the world after the Pentagon. It took more than 700 architects to finish it. And Ceausescu, the dictator, had to destroy half of the old town of Bucharest in order to make space for this construction. Yeah, that's why we're a little bit conflicted about, it's great that people want to come and see it, but at the same time, there's a lot of resources that were invested in this building with no purpose whatsoever. So from this building in front of you lays Union Boulevard, which was built to resemble Champs-Élysées in Paris. Remember, I told you that Bucharest was known as Little Paris. So a lot of the buildings that are found today in the Old Town resemble buildings from Paris. In the inside of the building, everything's done in marble, but less than 2% of the building is open to the public. Thousands of rooms are of no use to anyone. And some people say that there's even a bunker or a metro station underneath this building. The parliament goes there, but they only use just a very, very small amount of the building. And even though we're not traveling to Istanbul today, I had to put it in because we are talking about the Orient Express after all, and it wouldn't be Orient Express without its final terminus, Constantinople. This is a photo with the train station of the Orient Express in Constantinople. The building of the station happened for the Orient Express, and it marked the beginning of the golden age of this train journey. We've talked about it not being direct at the beginning, but even though the Ottoman Empire was in decline at the beginning of the 1900s, there were Turks, Greeks, Armenians, and Jews that all lived together in Constantinople, and they lived in peace. On the Orient Express came a lot of diplomats, investors, artists. So everyone was mingling together. And for the Western travelers, Constantinople was this very, very exotic destination. And that's why it captured all the attention. But when you think of the Orient Express, the train itself is just a major, it's just a link between major European capitals. The luxurious train only ran to Constantinople twice a week, sorry. This is the train station where it would stop. The name was Sirkeci. I'm really hoping I pronounced that correctly. It's called Sirkeci train station in Istanbul. It was, in fact, a point of pride for all of Turkish people at the moment. It's not in use. It's just a museum. It was a German-trained Prussian architect that built this heavily Ottoman-influenced building. And he wanted to represent the fusion of the East and the West with Constantinople, because after all, Constantinople or Istanbul was the gateway of Europe towards the Orient. It was where the West ended and the East began. So hopefully he managed to embody this into its architecture. You notice the curved arches of the windows, painted windows. And I told you it's a museum today. There's a locomotive in there, one of the earlier locomotives that Orient Express used while passing through the city. And today we have the Venice Simplon Orient Express. You can still ride on the Orient Express if you want to. It will set you back a lot of money depending on your needs. But let me tell you, the grand suites that I've showed you at the beginning are somewhere around £40,000 for a 6-day journey. The Venice Simplon, as it's named today, it's not novel. It was one of the routes created after the First World War. And it was just, a complex combination of carriages and destinations all throughout Europe. This is a poster to represent the route that the Simplon took after the First World War, when they were trying to avoid Germany. And after the Second World War, the Orient Express, they recovered, but they mainly recovered because they received American funding. It was the Marshall Plan that helped rebuild the infrastructure that was severely damaged. It was partially funded, but of great help. And during the Cold War, the Orient Express was, despite some interruptions, one of the few links between Eastern and Western Europe. Of course, communist countries, they started imposing stricter border controls. They started imposing third-class carriages, inexpensive seats. So it became increasingly difficult to travel towards the East, and most of the people that you would find on board of the trains were normally either diplomats or just political refugees that were trying to escape to the West. And because we've talked about the American influence, it is the company, they saw the decline in European tourists, and they tried to bring in American tourists because there were because of the American aid. There were already thousands of U.S. officers present in Europe, and there was a lot of enthusiasm back in the States for this train. So they started advertising, and little by little, well-off Americans came to visit the Orient Express in Europe. So this is just a travel brochure of those times. After the company completely collapsed after the 1977, when they were starting selling most of the sleeper cars and everything, the tide turned actually for the Orient Express in 1982. It was an American-British entrepreneur who was also a railroad enthusiast that bought the sleeper cars at auction and went in to revive them, to restore them, and to bring back the old shine of the Orient Express, the one that we most commonly associate with the book or with the movie, and to bring back the glamour. So if you ask them today, is that the Orient Express of the 1930s? They will say yes, because they are the same sleeper cars, restored and made to look as they used to. But if you ask someone else, they will say that's not the Orient Express. It's just a privately owned company that are trying to copy what the Orient Express once stood for. Just like the Wagon-Lit, the original company, they do not own the locomotives. They only use the locomotives of each nation that they pass through. And they do have luxurious Pullman cars this time. Over time, I'm not going to bother you with the details, but the Pullman cars eventually reached Europe through UK, and one UK investor brought the Pullman cars through the Orient Express in Europe further on. They do not use the Simplon line, even though they are called Venice Simplon. They traverse Austria to reach Venice, and it regularly passes through Vienna, Budapest, and Prague, runs through Istanbul only once a year. So if you want to go on an original Orient Express journey from Paris to Istanbul, you can do so every September, if I'm not mistaken. So just wanted to share with you a video. This is a promotional video of the company that owns the Venice Simplon today. I'm not sure if you can hear the sounds.
You can hear it.
So as you can see, they're trying to appeal to a much younger generation. They do struggle with this. Most of their customers are, of course, much older, because they are the ones often that have the nostalgia for the golden age and have the money to actually spend on such a journey. So in most of their advertisement, you will see younger people, of course, the orchestra, a dinner party, after party with cocktails, and they mostly represent the grand suites. But I told you, the grand suites are somewhere around 40,000 pounds. The company that owns the Orient Express today is called Belmont, and they also, of course, offer other luxurious travel experience as river cruises, journeys. They have hotels all over the world. So all in all, I consider this to be an experience of a lifetime. So you have you are on your final leg of the journey, and we have come to the final chapter of our story. So last time we left Miss Popescu knocking on Mr. Ford's cabin because she was curious what happened to him, if he was feeling all right. After knocking, she starts noticing that blood started pouring outside of his door, so flowing pretty much. Of course, she gets scared. She cries for help, somebody help. Everyone comes rushing towards her cry, and Mr. Ford is the one that also pushes through and breaks the door. Inside, we see the lifeless body of Mr. Grunder that was savagely killed with a knife. It was just a kitchen knife. And his lifeless body is the one that was producing the blood that was coming through the door. Mr. Ford, all the composed person, he was shocked himself. He's the one that checks the body and he says, "Oh my God, he's dead and cold. No one touches anything. We have to wait until we arrive in Bucharest and alert the police." So you are just as shocked. You don't know what happened. You are the one that got acquainted with all of these characters throughout your train journey, but you might have a pretty good idea of who is the one that killed Mr. Grunder in the end. Mr. Ford announces the murder ahead of their arrival. From Sinaia to Bucharest is normally a two-hour ride. So he announces the murder, and you are waited in Bucharest by the Romanian police and Mr. Barbu. Mr. Barbu is the Romanian count that hired you in the first place. You contact him and tell him that there was a problem, there was a murder. You actually came here as a detective to help him solve a delicate matter, but you end up in another murder mystery. So Mr. Barbu is our Romanian liaison. He is the Romanian count, and he is the one that will help you discover our murderer. So can you guess the killer? We have here a list of all the characters. This is where our journey ends and your journey as well. You have arrived in Bucharest, but you have a mystery on your hand. And I will give you a rundown of the characters before you vote into the polls. Miss Baudelaire was the retired French artist. She is the one that had something against Mr. Grunder because he is the one that made her give up her daughter. Miss Popescu was the Romanian actress, but she was the adoptive daughter of Mr. Horvath. Mr. Grunder was the Swiss banker. He is the one that's dead now, unfortunately. Mr. Horvath is our Hungarian industrialist who is a corrupt person. He is the adoptive father of Miss Popescu, and he knew that this time Mr. Grunder had all the proof necessary to put him in jail, to put him in prison. This information was also known by Miss Popescu as well. She had already lost her mother recently. She didn't want to lose her father too. Mr. Ford was the train conductor. He also had something against Mr. Grunder. He is the one that gave him his credit for mortgage that he couldn't repay, so he had lost his house because of it. And our last character is Mr. Barbu. He's actually the one that's helping us solve this mystery.
Georgiana, can you see how the votes are going?
I am seeing how the votes are going. I am going to wait for a lot more people to vote in. And once we reveal our murderer, I will also let you know some other, how the murder happened actually. I did share some music, but I'm not sure if it went through. Mara, can you hear any music from me at all?
No music. It's looking like we have about 75% of our audience answered the question. And it looks like there's a lot of interaction on Facebook as well. There's a lot of people doing it in chat. So I think you might be able to move forward.
But we have a tie. How am I going to move forward from this?
You do. In fact, you have a three-way tie.
I have a three-way tie. So we have Mr. Horvath. He has a pretty good motive, I have to tell you. He was about to be put in jail. He is corrupt, so he doesn't have any scruples to kill someone to not be put in jail. But you have to think, where was the occasion? How did he kill Mr. Grunder? Then we have Miss Popescu, of course. She was the daughter of Mr. Horvath, but her being the killer would be also quite horrifying, as even though she doesn't know, she is the biological daughter of Mr. Grunder. And we have Miss Baudelaire, who also, she had a pretty good motive to murder him, but again, when did that happen? We have Mr. Ford too. He is the one that put some white powder inside Mr. Grunder's water, but I would have to reveal what was that white powder. So Mr. Ford was not a killer. He is not our killer. He wanted to take revenge, but he did so by putting laxatives in Mr. Grunder's water. So that's why he couldn't attend. He wanted to make him lose the walking tour through Sinaia and just to make his journey miserable overall. So Mr. Grunder was actually bedridden and he was alive at the time of the journey in Sinaia. He just had a very bad case of diarrhea because of Mr. Ford. When Miss Popescu was knocking on Mr. Grunder's door, that's why Mr. Ford didn't linger. He knew why Mr. Grunder was feeling bad, so he didn't feel like he had what to do there. So I see that Miss Popescu is favorite with 613 votes over 597 for Mr. Horvath and Miss Baudelaire. And are you ready? Are you ready to find who our killer is tonight? Ready? I don't know if you can hear my music now. It's supposed to be.
Yes, we can hear music now.
The song is actually called True Identity, and it's from the soundtrack of The Murder on the Orient Express movie that came out in 2017. And tonight, I hope you had fun. I hope this murder mystery, even though, you know, it had to be put into a very short amount of time, I had to give you a little bit of context. But I did try my best. I put whatever script I could come up with into comic books so that you can understand better. And hopefully you've enjoyed this tour. And I have to say that our murderer for tonight is Miss Popescu. So well done, everyone that voted. It was a very tight choice. Congratulations on completing this murder mystery, and thank you, Mara, for putting it all together.
It's awesome. Thank you, Georgiana. I think that the murder mystery was an amazing twist on an already extraordinary tour. We do have quite a few questions if you're interested in doing some Q&A. I'm going to actually continue to share a screen here, which will give everybody in the audience some way to tip the tour director if you're so inclined. If you did have a good time and you have some appreciation to spare some change, you can use Venmo, PayPal. You can go on my website and do it via credit card. I'm stalling a little bit to give Georgiana a minute to get into the questions so that we can go over some of the questions. There's a lot of great questions here about the Orient Express, some of the stops that we made. So if you're ready, Georgiana, you can read off some questions and have at it.
Yeah, I see a lot of the people ask if I can go into detail of how the murder happened. And of course, that's the whole point of this Q&A, because you don't know how the murder happened. And this was actually a pretty random murder. So Miss Popescu was knocking on the door of Mr. Grunder's cabin. And she was a young actress, right? She just saw the opportunity. She wasn't a vicious killer. She wasn't a very strategic murderer, but she just saw the opportunity. Like in her mind, it all laid out. Like he was feeling bad already. He had missed Sinaia's tour, so she had the alibi. She was on the tour with everyone else. Mr. Ford had seen her knocking on Mr. Grunder's cabin. So she had an alibi there too. So as the moment Mr. Ford left her, because he wasn't interested, he knew what was going on, she enters the cabin out of curiosity to see what happened to Mr. Grunder. And she saw him there sleeping, probably with a very tired look on his face after all the diarrhea he had suffered. And that's when she mustered the idea in her head. She was thinking like, I don't want to lose another parent. I'm suffering enough because I've lost my mother. I don't know what I would do without my father right now. And she just sees a gleaming knife on Mr. Grunder's desk table. And she said, what will happen? Like, I don't think anything bad can happen to me because I have alibi. Everyone saw me today at the tour. Everyone saw me in the dining car. I don't think anything will happen. So she just pulls him out of the bed onto his face. You've seen how he was found. And then she just shoves the knife into his back, then quickly comes out again, you know, pretending to be still knocking on his door. Because the murder was so fresh, that's why when the blood started pouring easily. So she pretended to be scared, in distress, like, oh my God, look what happened. Everyone, please come and witness this. I was just with you a few moments ago. Of course, as I said, it wasn't a planned murder. It was just context murder. She saw the opportunity. She was frightened. She wasn't thinking clearly in distress because due to her mother's murder and her father's imminent imprisonment. So that's what she decided to do. Yes, she was his daughter. She was his biological daughter. She had been adopted by Mr. Horvat when she was born. And Mr. Grunder knew that she was his daughter. And was planning on telling her in the near future. What gave you the idea for this particular virtual tour? Both of the subjects are favorites of mine. So I'm passionate about murder mysteries. I've read most of Agatha Christie's books, and I love trains. I've never written on the Orient Express, but I would very much love to do so sometime in the future. And yeah, I mean, I've read the book, I've seen the movies, I've seen all of Hercule Poirot's series. So it seemed logical. Is the train still operated today? It is. It's called Venice Simplon Orient Express. It's privately owned, and you can go on the same journey. She didn't mention the cities. I did. The cities were all mentioned. I know there's a question in the quiz that includes a city that we have not visited, but it was on the route from the map. And I have mentioned that city several times that the Orient Express passes through. Are there bunk beds? Yeah, I mean, the twin cabin has 2 beds, one on top of the other, similar to bunk beds, but they are not necessarily. What was the cost of the trip at the time? So at the time when the Orient Express first started, it would cost somewhere around the value of 1,800 euros today. So a little bit more than $2,000. And you have to put this in context. $2,000 was a quarter of the annual amount of a Frenchman at the time. So it'll be a quarter of your salary today, which is quite a lot. But I mean, it's the same today. If you pay 40,000 quid for the grand suite of the Orient Express, I know a lot of people that don't win that much in a year. So why did Bucharest stop receiving the Orient Express? The country was communist, but surprisingly so. The Orient Express actually stopped working in 1991. So just after the revolution, things were chaotic in Romania at those times. Nothing new, anything. Everyone was trying to steal for themselves. All the government companies were, just trying to catch their bearings. It was later introduced at the beginning of the 2000s. How did a train go from London to Calais over the channel? They would have to take the ferry. My question is, the train passed through the city of Deva in Transylvania? No, it passes through Timisoara. How much did it cost to ride? And do you know what is today? I've answered this. How many passengers did the train hold? A lot. The train was not fixed from beginning until the end. Each time they would go into a different location, you would add a different car full of passengers. So it could range from a few, like 20, 30 people to hundreds of people, depending on how many cars it would be attached to the train. Is there any evidence that Agatha Christie actually traveled on the Orient Express? Yes, this is well documented into her biography. She used to take the Orient Express to travel to see her husband in Syria. It wasn't the Orient Express in Syria. From Istanbul, she would take the Taurus Express to see her, to go and see her husband. It was connected with the Orient Express, but yes, she has been on the train many times. The book that the spy wrote, I'll look it up for you. Robert Powell, Spy. My Adventure as a Spy. So that's the name of the book, My Adventure as a Spy. What was Romania part of before it became an independent country? So Romania was different regions inhabited by Romanian populations, such as Transylvania. It was Moldova to the east. It was Wallachia to the south. The population was Romanian. They weren't united until King Carol first came and started the Kingdom of Romania with that name. I remember the phrase "nihil sine deo at Pelish Castle." Very good, Carolina. That's very good. That's on the Romanian coat of arms, the royal family's coat of arms. What is the cost of a ticket in USD? So 3,000, 4,000, they range from 2,000 something pounds all the way until 40,000 pounds. So 40,000 pounds, maybe 50,000 US dollars, somewhere around that. So what is the rest of the parliament used for? That's a very good question. Nothing is just laying there for ghosts. Do the 40,000 pounds include any food? Yes, of course. Once you are aboard the Orient Express, you have a luxurious travel experience, all fine dining, everything catered for you. You have your own butler. You step aboard the train and you're just, in absolute heaven, luxurious heaven. Where is Sinaia? In Bucharest. Bucharest is the capital of Romania. It's located in the south of the country, and Sinaia is very central. So it's right as you would go from Bucharest towards the mountains in the center of the country. It's called Prahova Valley. How long was the journey from Paris to Constantinople? It was around 80 hours. So the quiz says, okay, so maybe I was wrong. Did Michael Jackson ever went on the Orient Express? He did. So then I'm going to have to consider that that answer as correct. So my bad. He came to Bucharest, so I knew that much. He came and he spoke to the Romanian people. He said, I'm so glad to be here in Budapest. Budapest was the capital of Hungary, but it's very easy to mix the two. It's just a few letters difference. When did Miss Popescu murder Mr. Grunder and why? We've been through that. Missed who the murderer was, Miss Popescu. If a deluxe trip is 40,000, how much is the less expensive one? $3,000, $4,000, depending on the type of room that you choose. Yes, so I see this Michael Jackson again. So sorry, that was my bad in doing the quiz. I will consider Michael Jackson as the correct answer, and everyone will be accounted for as a good answer.
Let's talk about the quiz for a second. When are we closing the quiz out so that we pick the winners, and how will we alert the winners?
Yeah, I was thinking because you are going to send a follow-up email to everyone. It'll be done right before that. So when you send the follow-up video, we will also have a winner for the quiz. How does that sound?
So the follow-up video goes out tomorrow. So let's say by tomorrow morning, we'll pick the winners, and we will alert the winners before that follow-up video.
And for those of you that want to purchase the book, like say you're not going to win, I will give it out as reference tomorrow where you can purchase it, and you can find a lot more about the Orient Express, a lot more illustrations. It offers 360 views inside the cars. So many interesting stuff that I've heard, that I've learned from that book. Was Miss Baudelaire the biological mother? Yes, she was.
We have a question about Vlad. Where's Vlad? I was expecting a surprise appearance.
Vlad is actually here with me, but unfortunately I could not include him as a character this time. No Vlad the Impaler on the Orient Express. But fun fact, Jonathan Harker in Dracula's novel, he traveled on the Orient Express alongside Mina and Van Helsing when they went back to Transylvania to murder the vampire. So the Orient Express is also mentioned in Dracula's novel. Contact the company and tell them what you've done. They owe you a free trip. Yes.
Georgiana,
that would be very nice.
The graphics were great and amazing. Who was the artist responsible for the mystery part of this presentation?
So the graphics were done by a Romanian illustrator. His name is Emilian Octavian. I can write it down in the chat, but if you want some illustration work done, you can always ask me or Mara how you can get in touch with him. I have actually found him on Freelancer platform. I know a lot of you are familiar with him. It was just a game of chance that he was actually Romanian, so he was able to understand very well what I had to put in drawing.
Is the Orient Express run on diesel, electric, or coal? And has it changed since its time in the 30s?
Yeah, so it used to be run on coal, obviously, but every country uses their own locomotives. It's diesel today, but it might differ from country to country. If they're using electrical locomotives right now, then that's what the Orient Express will be running on. This can change from year to year, but definitely no one uses coal anymore.
Are you an Agatha Christie lover of her novels? And if so, what's your favorite mystery book of hers?
My favorite, I love Murder on the Orient Express a lot, but I have to say it goes hand in hand with Murder on the Nile. I'm also very keen on ancient Egypt, and yeah, both of the books for me, they represent stuff that I love. So it's Murder on the Nile and it's Murder on the Orient Express.
Here's a question that I'll answer for you. How can we support Georgiana with positive reviews? Georgiana has a company. Do you want to tell a little bit about your company and where they can find you on social media?
Of course. So I represent the company, me and Vlad together. It's called Romanian Thrills. If you type in on Facebook, Romanian Thrills, you will be able to find us. If you see our faces, that's us. Our website is romanianthrills.us. You will also find this website at the end of the quiz as well, if you've filled it in. Find us on Instagram on romanian.thrills. Or just our email. We normally do boutique travel tours through Romania exclusively, small group tours or privately pursued tours. Obviously, because of the pandemic, as Mara has explained, there's not a lot of traveling happening right now. But you can check everything out on our website, romanianthrills.us. What tours we do, what types of experiences we offer, and yeah, we can keep in touch there.
Great. I think that is pretty much the end of our questions. So if you are good, I'm good. And we're going to say that I will also send out the link. I'll put it on my Facebook page right now, the link for the quiz, because I know some people were asking for that and they didn't get it. So we'll put that up there again so you can see it. I hope everybody had a great time tonight. We certainly love the unique journey that you took us on through the Orient Express. And for everybody out there, thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, Georgiana.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you from me, and thank you from Vlad for the people that wanted to see him. Here's Vlad.
I felt I was in the back doing the technical stuff. So yeah. Hope you enjoyed our tour, and hope to see you one day in Romania or virtually.
All right. We'll see you soon. Take care.